Welcome back to the main stage. Welcome back after the break to Swiss Cyberstorm. I'm very happy to announce our next speaker, Nadim Kobeissi from Paris or Beirut. I didn't know Nadim until very late, and I should have known him. I was researching a different topic, actually, for my previous Cyberstorm in a nutshell interview that we're running online. I was researching the background of Jean-Philippe Aumasson, and then I stumbled around a quote that Nadim gave about of Jean-Philippe's book. I thought, that is really intelligent. I need to get to know this person, I need to research him, and pretty quickly I got to know a person who has a background in cryptography, but understands cryptography as a building piece for something much bigger, or as a key building piece in our modern internet society. So he thinks he has a larger role than only researching and publishing about cryptography. And he has started a startup about communication, which is way out of cryptography, but he's also interested in privacy in general and what it means to us. And we're seeing a paradigm shift, as I previously said, now that even Apple is no longer considering your private phones as your private devices. And he's going to talk to us about this, what it means, what it could mean for you, and what it could mean to society, and what we can probably do about this. Please welcome Nadim.
Hello. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Please believe me when I say that Bern is one of the most beautiful cities I've ever seen in my whole life. It's really quite nice here. And you guys should be proud to have such a beautiful city with such clean air. Everything's so clean and quiet, and there's beautiful mountains and great architecture. It's really one of the most beautiful places, so it's great to be here. This talk is meant for the people who saw the recent Apple news where they announced they were going to do some content scanning on phones, scan the photos, and who basically thought that people such as myself were making a big deal out of things, that maybe we don't like law enforcement or maybe we are being paranoid. The purpose of this talk is to illustrate the entire story in a way that hopefully makes sense and to convince you that we are right to be worried about this topic. We'll start with an objective description of the proposal, followed by arguments against the proposal, followed by arguments for the proposal that Apple is proposing, and a conclusion. So, in order to actually understand what I'm talking about, it's important to keep two acronyms in mind. NCMEC stands for National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, an American institution based in the United States. And CSAM stands for Child Sexual Abuse Materials, and this largely refers to photos and videos of, unfortunately, children being abused. So initial rumblings occurred on Twitter. Professor Matthew Green from Johns Hopkins University said that he's had independent confirmation from multiple people that Apple is releasing a client-side tool for CSAM scanning tomorrow and that this is a bad idea. So there were already some concerns about what was going to happen. And indeed, less than 24 hours later, Apple announced 3 new measures in a document that they published on their website called Apple's Expanded Protection for Children. So they announced 3 things. First, they said the Messages app, iMessage, will add new tools to warn children and their parents when receiving or sending sexually explicit photos. They also said that new technology in iOS and iPadOS will allow Apple to detect known CSAM images stored in iCloud Photos by performing on-device matching using a database of known CSAM image hashes. And then third, they said that Siri and Search will also be updated. Okay? So the big deal is this one. This is what we care about. The others are not very important, and they're actually good. So the changes that were proposed to Messages were basically reasonably intuitively covered under the functionality and the user experience of parental controls. And they don't, they work on via consent by both parent and child, and they don't send silent reports to the police or anything like that. So it's not a bad design. The changes made to Siri were very simple. If you ask Siri a bunch of weird questions, you get more appropriate answers. That's fine too. The problem lies with this feature that I will describe now. So iPhones that have iCloud Photos, which is pretty much all iPhones, will have silent, automated local scanning on the device not over the internet, of their photos to detect objectionable content, which in this case is CSAM. And if CSAM is found in relevant quantities, a report is sent to Apple and potentially the authorities, who will be able to review it and follow up with the authorities. How does it work? So here's a phone. And basically, every Apple phone, the proposal was that every Apple phone would ship with a database of known CSAM image identifiers. Let's call them that for now. And these are not CSAM images. They're basically CSAM image fingerprints, let's say, or hashes. And then whenever you take a photo and that photo is stored in iCloud Photos or in the Photos app on your phone, it will be checked to see if it matches these fingerprints for known CSAM photos. And then, if enough photos match, so there's a threshold. If one photo happens to match, nothing happens. If many photos match, then Apple will be able to decrypt and review these photos. And then, after a manual human review, they will check to see whether they are actually troubling, and in that case, report to the authorities without you knowing anything. And so it uses technologies like end-to-end encryption, private set intersection, secret sharing, other cryptographic techniques to indeed ensure that only the photos that are matching the private set and the hashes and so on are the ones that end up being reviewed and reported and decrypted and so on. So they do that. And so what do I mean by these fingerprints? So they use a technology called neural hash, and basically this is a way to create a fingerprint of a photo such that if changes are made to the photo, like basic changes, like for example here we have a photo that's compressed, or another photo that has the colors removed, it will still generate the same neural hash. So it'll be able to detect the photo even if it's cropped or downloaded from Facebook after Facebook image compression or stuff like that. That is the purpose of neural hash. And that's how this works. Okay, so that is the entire system that they proposed, that second feature, the one I find troubling. Now, why is this bad? Okay, let's start with technical criticism of this feature. Now, when Apple announced the feature, they gave a talk at the recent Usenix 2021 Security Symposium, a prestigious academic security conference, and they were really big into how they're targeting a lot of security guarantees that their competitors do not, right? And so traditional services, and this means Google Photos, they don't have source image no single trusted party. Apple has no single trusted party. Apple has third-party auditability. This is not very true. Source image correctness, database update transparency, and so on. We'll go through them, but in more relevant detail so that I don't waste your time. So first of all, Apple says they won't scan all photos. This is from Apple's website. Does this mean Apple is going to scan all the photos stored on my iPhone? No. By design, this feature only applies to photos that the user chooses to upload to iCloud Photos, and even then, Apple only learns about accounts that are storing collections of known CSAM images, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, who doesn't have iCloud Photos enabled? Hey, not bad. Okay, for the record, there's about 10 people in the audience that don't have iCloud Photos enabled, roughly. I believe that most people have iCloud Photos enabled, and what's really important to keep in mind here is that this scanning technology does not depend on iCloud Photos being enabled in order to work. Apple is making it such that it's only activated when iCloud Photos is enabled purely as a politeness, purely as a courtesy. The technology works entirely offline. There is no component in this entire design that is stymied or hindered by you disabling iCloud Photos. And this is central to why this is bad. To compare, with Google Photos, the scanning happens on the server side. So when you upload a photo, it goes on Apple's servers, on Google servers, excuse me, and then Google will scan it on their servers, their property, which they own, which is independent from your phone that you own, and is covered by their terms of use and so on. Okay? So Craig Federighi, Apple's Senior Vice President of Software Engineering, gave an interview to the press a few days after this feature was announced. He said, "We're not looking for CSAM on iPhones. The soundbite that got out early was, Apple is scanning my phone for images. That's not what's happening." This is a bit strange because if we read from what Apple published a few days earlier, to help address this, new technology in iOS and iPadOS will allow Apple to detect known CSAM images stored in iCloud Photos. But instead, this is the second red thing, instead of scanning images in the cloud, the system performs on-device scanning. So we're not looking for CSAM on iPhones. I mean, instead of scanning images in the cloud, the system performs on-device matching using database of known CSAM images hashes provided by NCMEC. Before an image is stored in iCloud Photos, an on-device matching process performed for that image against the known CSAM hash, right? So there's another promise that they made, which is auditability. So third parties, this is another quote from Mr. Federighi. Because it's on the phone, security researchers are constantly able to introspect what's happening in Apple's iPhone software. This is ridiculous. Apple's iOS operating system is the most closed environment in the consumer market, probably. If you want to actually obtain an iPhone so you can peer into and audit it, you have to apply to Apple's exclusive Apple Security Research Device program, where you pay to be loaned an iPhone that they have to approve you manually after a reference dossier, and it's like you're applying for an apartment in Paris or something, and you then have to basically return it after a while. It's only loaned to you. The entire ecosystem is incredibly closed. The notion that we're having serious auditability into how iOS works and how Apple devices work is simply not credible. When you have systems that are not auditable, you end up with, for example, here's another company that lied to users for years about end-to-end encryption, and this is not even with them controlling the hardware. This is just closed-source software, and this happens all the time. So the idea that security researchers are openly peering into iOS devices is simply not realistic, not reflective of reality. The third misleading security promise is that Apple is not subject to pressure. This is the most ridiculous one, maybe. This is again from Apple's website. Could governments force Apple to add non-CSAM images to the hash list? No. Very authoritative. Apple would refuse such demands, and our system has been designed to prevent that from happening. Really, Apple would refuse such demands. Apple dropped plans for encrypting backups after the FBI complained last year, about 2 years ago now, in January 2020. Okay? So Apple was going to encrypt iCloud backups. The FBI said this is going to hinder investigations. Apple stopped this plan. Apple, to this day, does not provide FaceTime in any iPhone bought in the United Arab Emirates, and only recently started providing it in Saudi Arabia. So if you buy an iPhone there, it doesn't have the app, and there's no way to get the app. Right? Because the government thinks that end-to-end encryption is being used for terrorism over there. Apple recently pulled an app by the Russian Democratic Opposition that gave citizens voting information, right? So that's Alexei Navalny's app. They occupied Google's offices with armed gunmen, right? Until Google and Apple both pulled the app. They're not subject to pressure. And also, Apple's entire cloud infrastructure in China is subject to tight controls by the Chinese government, to the point where your entire security model, if you own an iPhone in China, is fundamentally different from anywhere else in the world. Like the entire threat model, the security guarantees, the encryption, confidentiality, authentication guarantees are just fundamentally different, right? That's how bad it is. Let's read some stuff from the New York Times. This is a brilliant article in the New York Times about Apple's operations in China. Sometimes, Philip Shoemaker, who ran Apple's App Store from 2009 to 2016, would be awakened in the middle of the night with demands from the Chinese government to remove an app, not subject to government pressure. Professor Matthew D. Green, again, from Johns Hopkins University, quoted in the same article, Chinese intelligence has physical control over your hardware. That's basically a threat level you can't let it get to, not subject to government pressure. So let's look at the technology as well. So this is neural hash. Remember the technology that is used to determine if if one of your photos matches a objectionable photo containing child abuse images. So these are the same photo according to neural hash. These are the same photos according to neural hash. These are the same photos according to neural hash. It's, the collisions are possible and easy to make. So does this actually matter? Potentially no, because Apple did say that they do a manual review, right, of all photos that are revealed using neural hash. But there's an attack vector here where I can basically harass you. And so, for example, if I sent you images using WhatsApp, they actually, by default, get saved automatically in your photos library. And so all I have to do is create images that match known CSAM hashes, ship those over to you, and then your phone is constantly bleeping over at Apple, and eventually human error could get through. But Apple says that they have countermeasures such as a secret hash database. I don't believe this is very convincing. 2 types of hashing. So there's neural hash, and then there's something else. They haven't elaborated on this. And manual human review, which is relatively convincing, right? So it's not clear whether this matters, but the technology is not very solid, right? So let's look at so that was the technological criticism. This is why I don't think this works from a technological standpoint, and it's not even the important part. This is the more important part, the civic criticism. So nobody expects their phone photo album or their regular photo album. I don't expect my TV to start snitching on me if I'm watching evil videos on it. I don't expect my refrigerator to call the police if I store objectionable things in it. So there's the entire concept of personal privacy, right? So like I said, unlike Google Photos and unlike Microsoft OneDrive, with Apple's situation, they're scanning things locally on my device. So my device is locally in my pocket, checking if I'm a good person. And this is very different, right? So and again, iCloud Photos being enabled is just a politeness, right? So would you buy a safe? Question. Please raise your hand if you would. Would you buy a safe if a safe for your private belongings if the manufacturer insisted on passing by your house once every couple of weeks when you're not home to check if you're putting drugs inside the safe? Is that a reasonable, way to acquire private property and equip yourself? So yes, no one raised their hands. That's really reassuring. And the idea is that this is my safe in my home. I'm buying it for my own privacy. And really, our iPhones are safes in a very important way. Is it OK for Alexa to secretly call the cops if I ask for directions on how to bury a body? Right? So I don't think it should be OK. There is also the problem of mission creep. CSAM databases, so like hash databases that were used for CSAM, have already been abused. The Electronic Frontier Foundation has documented an instance of the Global Internet Forum for Counterterrorism, starting with a CSAM database, but expanding it to include terrorist content. So mission creep is already a thing that can happen. And furthermore, we'll get to that in a bit. But here's a relevant quote from Sarah Jamie Lewis, the director of Open Privacy, a Canadian organization. Stop using encryption so we can check your messages for criminal activity becomes allow us to scan all the files on your computer so we can check for criminal activity. This is just a way to bypass the privacy guarantees of end-to-end encryption in a lot of ways, right? And here's another really important point by Sarah Jamie Lewis. How long do you think it will be before the database is expanded to include terrorist content? It already has, not this one, but databases already have, as was shown in the previous slide. But also harmful but legal content. And most importantly, to me personally, state-specific censorship, right? So here in the West, we have the very valid, strongly agree with it, cultural conviction. It remains a cultural conviction, no matter how strongly we feel about it, that child pornography is wrong, right? I agree it's wrong, but we have culturally come to the decision that it's wrong, right? Other cultures believe that homosexuality is wrong. In fact, some cultures may think homosexuality is even more objectionable than child pornography, oddly. And so homosexuality and insulting the king are punishable in Saudi Arabia, heavily, and in other countries. If Apple is implementing this technology to scan local files on the device, they have to implement it uniformly across all devices because it's the same iPhone. You can buy it anywhere in the world. And if we are lending legitimacy to this technology existing on American iPhones and being used on American iPhones, it opens the way for Saudi Arabia to say, other countries to say, well, here we think that homosexuality is very sinful and problematic and the result of a mental illness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they could ask for that to be scanned. And then you end up with a bunch of LGBTQ people also being targeted. There could be, for example, situations in Russia or in China where we think that these, what could be journalists or political dissidents, get labeled as terrorists, and then it's terrorist content. We need to scan these phones for terrorist content. So state-specific differences are a big deal. According to Professor Matthew Green, the pressure is going to come from the UK, from the US, from China, from India, and from China. He is terrified about what that's going to look like, and I agree with him. This is a well-known authority in computer security. So what happens when the bad guys simply disable iCloud Photos? This is the most important slide in my entire thing, right? So guess how easy it is to disable iCloud Photos? Would you look at that? Look, see that big, helpful blue arrow here? That's how easy it is. So the issue is we're going to end up with a situation where the bad guys, maybe they will get caught for the first little while. And then they'll just be like, oh, I just have to go disable iCloud Photos. And my question to you, and this is maybe the most important point in my entire presentation, what happens then? So what happens when the bad guys realize that all you have to do is disable iCloud Photos? Remember that the technology is not reliant on iCloud Photos in order to work. It can work regardless. Apple is only enabling it when you enable iCloud Photos as a politeness, as a courtesy, right? But it works entirely locally. So it could very well be the case that you just disable iCloud Photos, but the technology is still running because it's all local scanning. And then, the police get called if you have objectionable content on your phone that's entirely offline, connected to the internet, but not syncing with iCloud, right? So at that time, society will have two options. Either they're like, no, we will only stick to enabling the technology when iCloud Photos is enabled, or they'll be just like, oh, it works offline anyway, so we'll just enable it all the time. And I absolutely think this is what's going to happen in case this is passed. The bad guys realize that iCloud Photos can easily be disabled. They disable iCloud Photos. We come to the conclusion that the technology works without iCloud Photos. We make it work without iCloud Photos. It's enabled all the time. Apple removed the headphone jack. It set a great precedent. Apple sets technological precedents. Apple removes chargers. No one ships with chargers anymore to save the environment. And so really, it's the precedent that worries me. It's the precedent that Apple is able to set across the industry. And it's the fact that this technology works without iCloud Photos necessarily being enabled. It's just a courtesy that Apple makes it work only when it's enabled. It's just being nice. And mission creep is really going to set in once the bad guys realize that they can just turn it off, and they will. And then we just decide that it's effective, so we're going to go after them anyway and enable it permanently. Arguments for these measures. All right, so NICMEC published a report, the 2020 reports by electronic service providers, and they said, oh, Facebook gave us 20 million reports of child abuse contents that they had to remove. Dropbox gave us 21,000 reports, but Apple only gave us 265 reports. And this is an argument, Apple is not doing enough. This is not a valid comparison. The vast majority of Facebook's services are public. They're used to publish posts on news feeds and personal public profiles. Dropbox is used to share files, right, with groups, with teams, and so on, largely. The vast majority of Apple's services are private. I'm either messaging people that I know personally, sharing photo albums with people I know privately. There's no very few front-facing Apple services, right? So I don't think this is a valid comparison. It's like comparing, a newspaper to a private bulletin board in your home, right, for your family. So of course, there's going to be less information that leaks out in the private bulletin board. I have, during my career, attributed a lot of bad faith to Facebook, and I think that bad faith is strongly deserved. Facebook is an evil company. But I am not yet ready to do the same for Apple. So I don't think that necessarily there's like a bunch of nefarious engineers at Apple or policy people at Apple doing this. I genuinely think that they're trying to do maybe the right thing. Maybe they're being influenced by certain American laws, which do exist. And I think that everyone wants children to be safe, and it's important to maintain a position that is legitimate and positive towards warning against these measures, right? We need to focus on the long-term consequences regarding our civil rights and what it means to own things privately, and not focus on the short-term consequences of, oh, we're going to catch a few more criminals in the first year or two, right? So again, slide, very important. Apple did something stupid, so the executive director of strategic partnerships at NICMEC sent a memo to Apple, and then Apple forwarded it, a vice president at Apple forwarded it to like all Apple employees, calling the memo like inspiring and positive. And basically the memo said, I know it's been a long day that many of you probably haven't slept in 24 hours. We know that the days to come will be filled with the screeching voices of the minority. Our voices will be louder, mocking and insulting people who are not okay with this and labeling them as crazy people on Twitter. Incredible. There's a lot of crazy people on Twitter. But generally speaking, making fun of anyone who had a problem with this. However, thankfully, about a month after the measures were introduced, Apple pulled them out. So they announced that they are going to, what's the word? So they're going to they're going to take additional time over the coming months to collect input and make improvements before releasing these critically important child safety features. They have not abandoned them entirely, so they could still introduce them, and I really hope that there will be pushback if that happens. I personally worked on creating this letter, Apple Privacy Letter. It was signed by over 9,000 people, including some experts and some public figures, such as Edward Snowden. The EFF launched a huge letter and global coalition. Many experts spoke out, and I hope that this actually had an effect. So in conclusion, private devices should remain private. I mean, weird that I have to say this. Local content scanning will be abused. I hope I have illustrated how. And there's a fundamental difference between what Google Photos does is scan photos that you upload to Google on Google servers under Google's terms of use, and your personal property spying on you on technology that can easily be abused, that cannot be controlled, that works offline, and that will be, if history is any indication, and early precedent, like recent precedent is any indication, will almost certainly be subject to mission creep and misuse. So I strongly encourage you to think more critically about these issues, think about the long-term implications, even though, yes, everyone wants the children to be safe, and child safety is of a paramount concern to any responsible citizen. Thank you very much. I don't know if questions are a thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadim. Thank you for this inspiring talk. I think, as you said, this was the most important slide. And I think it was about the precedent, because it's for us, as a technological community, we see the precedent in this. But I think the precedent argument is very hard to use because people see the short-term effect. Do you see, you've engaged in this already. Are people seeing the long-term effect, or is this just a lone voice, like in the desert, and the general audience, the people not at our conference, are they seeing the long-term effect as well, or are they not aware of the precedent that is being set by Apple here?
Well, a lot of brilliant experts have spoken out on this and have contributed to rendering a more pedagogical and accessible viewpoint on the issue. And I sincerely hope that this video will be posted on YouTube, and it'll be, for example, a reference. You can link someone who has 20 minutes to spare to learn more. However, unfortunately, I do not think that at the present time, people outside of this realm of interest actually care very much about this entire topic, right? Yeah. So I think that they don't understand why it's important, and even if they do, perhaps they don't have time for it, and that's perfectly fine and legitimate. But the best we can do is illustrate why we think this is a problem and hope to convince people that we are on the right track.
So it is our role to reach out.
Yes, and I mean, same as, well, I mean, global warming is a way worse problem, but like it's kind of like the same dynamics, right? The experts realize that there might be global warming. They try to enlighten people on why this might be an issue. So of course, this is not as bad as global warming, thank God, but this is the same dynamics. Some experts realize that something could be bad, and then we try to make it relevant to the rest of society such that collective action and decision-making can be made.
Thank you. Some Swiss chocolate for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nadim.